Good evening, friends. We are continuing learning the Chatzar Yosef. We are in chapter 13, section 3 of the chapter, page 194, 195. Brand new section, new continuation sort of story based on the same themes that we were talking about in the previous sections. But nevertheless, it's a brand new story, a story probably many of you never heard before in the Gemara, Masechet Gittin. It goes like this. The Gemara starts by bringing a verse, pasuk, from Lamentations, as they call it in English, which is Echa, what we call Echa. Chapter 2, verse 2. It says, Bilah Hashem velo hamalet kol naot Yaakov. Translation, Hashem swallowed up, and he did not pity all the dwellings of Yaakov. Yaakov, of course, is the father of Am Yisrael. It's talking about the Jewish people. It is related regarding this verse that when Ravin, a certain Chacham, came from the land of Israel to Bavel, right, there was two major hubs at this time of history of where the Chachamim were. One was Babylonia, Bavel, and one was Israel. And certain Chachamim would travel back and forth and relay information back and forth. Ravin was one of those people. He taught to the people in Bavel what he learned in Israel about this verse. What did he learn? He said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was one of the major leaders in Israel. So he said in his name, this verse is referring to the 600,000 cities that King Yanai had on King's Mountain. King's Mountain is, of course, Tur Malka, the place we've been talking about this entire chapter, was massacred by the Romans. Tur Malka. Tur means a mountain in Aramaic. Tur Malka, the king's mountain. King Yanai was a Jewish king, who was the king at the time, and one of his places was Tur Malka. 600,000 cities were there, he says. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav Asi, that King Yanai had 600,000 cities on King's Mountain, and each of them had a population like those who left Egypt, which is how much? 600,000 men, from the ages of 20 to 60. Men. Do the math on everybody else. Except for 3 of those cities, however, says the Gemara, who had populations not like that much who came out of Egypt, but double those who left Egypt. Now we're talking about 1.2 million men from the age of 20 to 60. Super blessed cities, super multiplicity in these 3 cities. I guess these are sub-cities, maybe call them sub-boroughs, regions within Tur Malka on King's Mountain. The 3 cities are Kfar Bish, Kfar Shechalaim, and Kfar Dichraya. Kfar means a village or a city. Yeah, I mean, Tur also means row in Hebrew, but it means mountain in Aramaic. So these 3 places: Kfar Bish, Kfar Shechalaim, Kfar Dichraya. Special places. The Gemara explains it was called Kfar Bish. Why was it called Kfar Bish? These are Aramaic words. Because its inhabitants would not provide houses for guests. What does Bish mean? Bish means bad in Aramaic. It means bad. The bad city. Why? Because its houses would not, the people would not open up their homes for guests. Yeah. The other city was called Kfar Shechalaim because their livelihood from that city was derived from the cultivation of leeks. Leek, the big green vegetable. And look at note 7. Rashi writes in Masechet Shabbat 140a that Shechalaim are kirishim, leeks. Shechalaim means leeks. Others translated as cress, watercress, another similar green vegetable. All agree there was a sharp tasting leafy green vegetable. That's what the city was famous for, cultivating it and selling it and distributing it. That's why it's called Kfar Shechalaim. And the 3rd place was Kfar Dichraya. Literally, this means the village of males. From the word zachar in Hebrew, which means male, but the rule is, one of the rules of translating a word from Hebrew to Aramaic is the zayin becomes a daled. Dechar. So instead of zachar, dechar. Dichraya, males. The city of males. Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan says it was called thus, city of males, because their women would give birth to males first, and then they would give birth to females at the end, and then they would stop. That's the words of the Gemara. What does that even mean? They gave birth to males, and then a female, and they stopped.
It sounds like you're gonna have boys first, and once you have a girl, later.
So what if they had a girl first? That never happened?
Boy first.
So what if they had a girl first? Well, that never happened?
So then they would stop automatically.
They would just stop having kids.
Never happened, girl first.
I don't understand. Just because you had a girl now doesn't mean the next pregnancy is going to be
But that's
not a boy.
Probably train of thought. They had a primitive train of thought. Probably like, yo, you're defective. Your genes are.
So you're saying these people were primitive. You're going out on a limb. There's times in the Gemara.
Your organs are not working the way it's
They're
supposed to.
tainted. That's it. You had a female, you're tainted. That's it.
Your organs are tainted.
Can't have a male anymore. Tell me, can any society function with mostly males?
Most societies are built by. All societies are built by men.
As far as I understand, every man needs at least one woman, right? At least one woman in those times, especially.
So they would go pillage, bring women from other places, and their women they would keep to a minimum.
Let's
Isn't
see.
that what they do in China, though?
Practically, it doesn't make sense. We have to see what this
Isn't that what
means.
they do in China right now?
Who knows what they're doing in China? I don't know. Call
Isn't
up
one
the
girl per
she.
household or something like that?
I don't know. Let's see. Says over here, Shara Chatzar. Let's look at the questions. They have rules against how many kids you could have. Yeah, that's true. In China. Shara Chatzar, questions over here. Are we to take these enormous population numbers here at face value? Just do the math of the. This is unbelievable numbers we're talking about. Why does our Gemara refer to these great numbers as like those who left Egypt, rather than providing actual numbers like it did for the number of cities? Because it doesn't make sense. It tells me, there were 600,000 cities, but then each city had the amount that left Egypt. Okay, you gave me a number over here. Why can't you just give me a number again? Why are you comparing me specifically? Why are you comparing these people specifically to the generation that left Egypt? Next Gemara. Since these three cities, Kfar Bish, Kfar Shechalayim, and Kfar Dichraya, are being put in a negative light by our Gemara, what exactly was the sin of each one of them? We have to assume they did something wrong. What did they do wrong that they're bringing that makes them be portrayed here in our Gemara in a negative light? Kfar Bish seems self-explanatory in that they did not provide places for guests to stay. Right, that's pretty bad, and the Gemara spells it out. They're called bad city because they didn't open up their homes to guests. What about Kfar Shechalayim? The leek city. What's so bad about that? What is so bad about building their livelihood and commerce off of leeks? And as for Kfar Dichraya, the third one, what is the evil in stopping to have children after having a girl? We have to analyze that. Third question, the wordage.
From doing a positive mitzvah.
Okay, but why specifically in that way?
What way?
That the way they did it. What was so bad about the way they did it? They had a boy, and then a girl, and they stopped. Technically, they did a mitzvah of having a boy and a girl. Technically, the mitzvah pruvu.
If you still have the ability to do it, you still have the ability to do.
Also, how did they stop?
That's like me telling you after you give $100, don't give no more to that.
Question is, how did they stop? Did they have some sort of a contraceptive method, some kind of potion that they drank that sterilized the woman?
Isn't that sterilize the woman?
Yeah. How did they stop? Did they just stop abstinence? No more relations with that wife? Get a new wife? Where do you get girls? The girls are going to run out eventually. There's too many men. Doesn't make sense.
But your question here is, why is it evil?
That too. Let's see. The wordage itself in which our Gemara describes Kfar Dichraya's activity seems troubling and needs further explanation. What does it mean that they would give birth to males first? That's another thing. How could they have chosen the outcome of their first pregnancies? You know, right now there's so much technology out there, they're working on genetic engineering of people. So don't be surprised that if in 10, 20, 30 years, when you want to have a child, or when your kids want to have, when your grandkids are going to be born, your kid's going to go to a certain fertility parlor. They're going to have a catalog. They're going to say, okay, do you want to have a male or a female? Okay, you choose. Only two genders. And they're going to say, do you want to have, do you want it to have blue eyes, brown eyes, blonde hair? How tall do you want it to be? What physique? You know, all these things. It's not, there's companies right now that are publicly traded companies that are working on this technology right now. 100%. So that was, that's going to be in future. But in their times, of course, it wasn't like that. So how does the Gemara just plainly say they would have males first? How do you know you're going to have a male first? Last question. Either way, it seems plain that all three of these cities are being painted in a negative light. This being so, how exactly did they merit the blessing of such great multiplicity? Right? If they're bad, why did they have such amazing barakah at the end of the day with such great numbers? That sums up our questions. Let's see some of the commentaries here. First one is the Ya'avetz. The Ya'avetz says one small point. He says perhaps the population numbers here are describing the total population from the day the state was established until the day it was destroyed, and not that this many people lived there at one time. Still, it's a lot of people. You want to say that? It's still a lot of people, and we're going to show you the math later on in the beginning of the Chatzar Yosef. It's still way too much people. But let's see. Next commentary, the Maharal, he says, are we to believe that so many people, 600,000 cities of 600,000 people each, lived on this relatively small mountain? Rather, he says, these numbers are not exact statistics. Chazal only use these figures to connote the concept of great multiplicity, which Tur Malkah was surely blessed with, nevertheless, relatively. Their numbers were indeed relatively large, just not to the exact extent of the numbers our Gemara presents here. Also, these figures are round numbers rather than being uneven exact statistics, because our Gemara is simply alluding to the essence of Tur Malkah, which was its preponderance in great multiplicity, which means it's just trying to underscore the fact that it had really a lot of people, more than it should have had in normal circumstances. Look at note number 1 here on the bottom. In the Maharal's introduction to the section of Agadah, dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem, Tur Malkah, and Beitar, he writes the following. There are 3 parts of a civilization that demonstrate the establishment of its settlement, that entrenched them really in their land that they live in. These are the presence of the Shekhinah in it, whether or not God's presence is there. Number 2, the multiplicity of the population. And number 3, the presence of fortified cities. Fortified cities means they had walls, and it was really established as a big place for people to grow. Each one of these places was destroyed one after the other. What are we talking about? Jerusalem, which we spoke about earlier, Tur Malkah now, and later we're going to see Beitar in the next few chapters, which is another huge place that was destroyed by the Romans. They were all destroyed one after the other, showing how the civilization as a whole was utterly destroyed by the Romans. First, the destruction of Jerusalem, which was the topic of chapters 6 through 10 so far, was the elimination of the presence of the Shekhinah, of God's presence, because God's presence was in the temple, and of course the temple was in Jerusalem, and that was destroyed. Next, this was the destruction of Tur Malkah, which is what we're discussing now. That was the elimination of the blessing of multiplicity of the population, because that's where they had so much multiplicity. The third, lastly, was the destruction of Beitar, which will be the topic of chapter 15 and on. That was the elimination of their major fortified city. That's what Beitar was. So it was a systematic destruction of the people, unfortunately, in that time of history. The Maharal says further over here on top, Tur Malkah's essence was multiplicity, and that's hinted in its name, because King's Mountain is why? Because since it is appropriate for a king to have many subjects, as it is written, through numerous people is glory of the king. Meaning there's more honor given to a king when you have a lot of people honoring him. This is a concept of halakha, by the way, as well, that we say all the time. That's why it's better to say a bracha together. It's better to have one person say kiddush and everyone answer amen. Because it's called barov am hadat melech. With more people plugging in together, it's a bigger glory to the king. And here also, concept of king and big numbers. Tur Malkah was a king's mountain, big numbers. Thus, our Gemara means that Tur Malkah's essence was fit to house these larger numbers. Okay, that's the Maharal. 3 more actually. Maharsha says over here, page 196, it is indicative that the verse in Echad that we're studying here is talking about Tur Malkah because of the usage of the word swallowed up. Let's go back to that verse, we mentioned it once. The verse says, Hashem swallowed up and he did not pity all the dwellings of Yaakov. And this is talking about Tur Malkah. As the Gemara will tell us further, in the next section, that the actual landmass of Tur Malkah could not have housed so many cities and people. Thus, the language of swallowed up is fitting because after Tur Malkah's destruction, it looked as if all those cities were swallowed up. Wow. The Malbim, yeah. So we're going to say in the next section a famous piece of Gemara that says that the land of Israel stretches out to house all of Am Yisrael there. Meaning the land itself is objectively not enough to hold all the Jewish people. So how do so many people live there at the same time? How do so many Jewish people go to the temple in Jerusalem during the... Exactly, it compares it to the skin of a gazelle or deer. where it's very, very elastic, where when the deer is alive, the skin looks normal. When the deer dies and you skin it, it shrinks. Like, and you look at the height of the deer, like there's no way that this skin covered this entire huge meat. Doesn't make sense, right? And the same way, the Gemara is going in the next section is going to compare the land of Israel, that it stretches out miraculously in space-wise for the Jewish people to all live there comfortably and be there comfortably. So you're saying the same thing applies to Turmaka. Turmaka, the King's Mountain, was in Israel, and that's why it was able to house so many people.
So, but it's still saying 1.2 million people per city, but it's still...
Yes. So the Maharsha doesn't seem to see that as exaggeration. He seems to be saying that it was possible. And then once they died, once it was destroyed, he's saying that it gave the appearance that it was like swallowed up, like shrunk up completely, just like the skin of a deer.
Historically, what was the peak population of Jewish people?
I don't know. According to this Gemara, if you take it face value, a lot more than people in the world. Which again, most opinions agree, like the Maharal, that it's exaggeration. It's coming to teach you concepts and metaphors. Good. So there's another commentary I brought on note number 4. The Malbim, he says that when the verse says that it was swallowed up, it literally means that the civilization, the cities of Turmakal, were swallowed up by the ground, actually, miraculously. So other nations should not see Israel's despair. That's what the Malbim writes. Okay, Maharsha says further, our Gemara is underscoring the irony of these 3 villages. That despite a certain negative characteristic that each one had, they were still able to achieve such great multiplicity. This multiplicity, however, is not a sign of blessing as it usually is, says the Maharsha. The people of Kfar Bish, the bad city, were wicked with their money in so much as they did not host guests, resembling the citizens of Sodom. Right? Sodom, remember?
When you were writing this book, and you didn't like the answers you found, was just not included?
I'm sorry, what?
Like if the answer wasn't geschmackable.
No, I put them all the time, and then I always, many times I disagree with
I'm
them.
saying, I feel like you found questions that didn't have good enough answers, so you didn't put them in. Or didn't have answers?
I'm sorry. Again, I found questions that didn't have answers?
Yeah, like
the questions are all mine. Some of them are questions from other people that I added.
I feel like there were some. Did you ever think of some questions that you didn't include in the Shar?
No, he's asking.
I don't get your question, man.
So you see all the questions in the Sharia.
Yeah, that's me analyzing the Gemara, just thinking.
Is there any ones?
Did you ever have a question where you couldn't find an answer to it, so you didn't include the question in the?
Oh, no. I try to make it come full circle. No.
I'm saying, was there any questions that you didn't put in?
Perhaps. Like unanswered questions, you're saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Perhaps. Probably, yeah. I have some deleted notes. Probably. Yeah, I wanted to make it all make sense. So usually every question that I have in the Chatzar will be answered in the course of the chapter. Many times, actually, I would write something in the Chatzar Yosef, a new idea, and then I think, hey, I didn't ask a question on this. So I'd formulate the question and go back. We went back in circles a bunch of times and throw in the question.
It seems like you did it, yeah.
Yeah. So it's from front back and back to front editing also. Okay. So the Maharsha is saying it's like the citizens of Sodom who didn't take any guests. Why should we entertain travelers who only come and take our resources, right? Who said this? This Masechet Sanhedrin. That's what the people of Sodom said. They said, why should we allow travelers to come here and just take up our resources and just, why should our borders be open and let them take all our jobs and and vote for the other party, right? Right?
Give them water, we get nothing out of it.
Same thing here, yeah. Energy, water, we're paying for that out of our tax dollars. Of course. It's similar. As for Kfar Shechalayim, however, the inhabitants were only able to financially sustain themselves by commercializing leek. Therefore, their multiplicity is not such a blessing. It's not just because they have so much people, the fact that they can only make business off one industry, which is leek, means their blessing was not really a full blessing. Look at number 6. It seems the Maharsha means here that blessing in general, the idea of blessing, is present when there is a variety available, which was not the case in Kfar Shechalayim since their crop was limited to just leek. So blessing means you have options. The fact that I could choose one out of 100 things, that's a blessing. The fact that I could go to my closet and choose, what I want to wear. This suit, this color, that fabric. Options is a blessing. Okay. As for the city of Dichraya, the Gemara in Sanhedrin 16b says that with the birth of a female, multiplication comes to the world. That's what the Gemara says. Meaning the possible to multiply, the ability to multiply comes once a female is born. Makes sense. Women have children, right? Fine. It says further in Bava Batra 141a, another Gemara, that when a daughter is first born, it is a nice sign for the subsequent sons. It's a good sign you're going to have good sons afterwards. So having a daughter first is good, according to that Gemara.
A good son.
Huh?
My sister was born first.
There you go. You see, you're living proof. Hence, even though there are so many people in this village in Kfar Dichraya, since most of them were males, the multiplicity that existed there was not the blessed type. Since the blessed type of multiplicity is brought about by females, which were the minority of the population. Females bring barakah. It's a deep concept. I can go into an hour talking about that. But basically the idea is women are the ones that keep barakah and tie it down to wherever they are, the family, the house, the city, etc. The women keep the barakah. Men are the multi-potential that they could bring down barakah through their mazal, but the women are the ones that actualize it and actually hold it and manifest it and make you feel it. That's why you have to get married. Because they're the ones that bring your seed to life. That's exactly how does it work? Reproduction. You have so many millions and trillions of seeds that you produce in your life, but if you have no woman, none of them will come to actualization. Understand? Good. That's the deep concepts of male and female in Kabbalah, which there's a few dedicated chapters on that. This is slowly going to get more and more mystical as we go along. It's very basic right now. It's going to get very mystical very soon, especially chapter 15. Okay. Ben Yehoyada says, second to last commentary. Let's finish the commentary today and then Chatzar Yosef next week. Ben Yehoyada says that the sin of Kfar Bish, the sin of the bad city, was likened to that of Sodom. Nevertheless, the fact that they had the blessing multiplicity must mean that they were good in some way. So he's looking at it from a positive point of view. He's trying to give them a benefit of the doubt. If they had so much people, they must have such bracha, some good thing about them. Therefore, we must say that their rejection of guests was for a good and noble reason, says the Ben Yehoyada. He's trying to defend them. Because if they allowed more people to come into their already inflated city, when the cost of living would become more expensive due to inflation, causing the poor residents of the city to suffer, not being able to afford their standard of living. To avoid this, they put a ban on allowing guests. So he finds a noble reason to defend why they didn't want to take any more people in.
Guests or
which is kind of like what Republicans say today. We don't want people coming into through the border because they're making things more expensive.
They could come legally from legal.
No, but if everyone came legally, less people would come. That's the point. That there's a filtering process. Less would come, too. Right now it's just flowing in. Inflation's going up.
When you're saying guests over here,
that's true.
Guests for like 2-3 days, 2 weeks, or we're saying guests like new citizens.
He doesn't explain. That's a great point. That's a great point. Is he talking about new people who want to live there, or is he talking about people who are passing through? It's two completely different things. Completely different things, right? Look at Las Vegas. Most of the people there are guests. They're driving the economy. They don't live there. They're driving the economy big time. They come for a week and they go. They come, spend a lot of money and go. That's what we want. Right? So it's different than people trying to live there all the time. So we have to see. It's a great question. Right. So exactly. The verse, the Gemara uses the language of guests. That was the language. Yeah, ushpiza. Ushpiza means guests. Like in Sukkot. Ushpizin. Okay? So in the next paragraph, Ben Yehoyada, he says, as for Kfar Shechalaim, city of leek, named after the great production of leek, it seems that they acquired a physiological advantage in having children. Since it says in Yoma 18b that 5 food items bring a person to impurity, meaning, what does it mean impurity? Seminal emission by a man at night when he sleeps. Meaning they induce production of more seed in a man. One of them is leek. because it's pungent, strong food. Therefore, it makes sense that the city had an abundance of leek. No, I'm sorry, the city that had an abundance of leek had an abundance of people, offspring. That's how he explains it. Okay, that's the Ben Yehoiada. Last one he says, as for the city of Kfar Dichraya, the nature of the air in that village caused the women to have a greater desire than men for marital relations, he says.
You know how they say love is in the air?
There you go,
They would
love is in
bottle
the air.
from that city
And sell it as a pheromone.
Yeah, love is in the air tonight.
How do you, nature of the air, how does that?
He says that particular place, the environment there, go figure. This meant that the women, okay, so we have to put on our big boy hats. We're going to talk a little bit about marital relations here. This meant that the women climaxed first during marital relations. They finished first, as we say, right? Why? There's a difference in the Gemara about that, in Halakha. Causing the conceptions of most of these unions to be males, baby boys. Right? Look at note number 7, we explained. The Ben Yehoiada here is alluding to a famous teaching that is taught in the Gemara elsewhere, Masechet Berachot, also Masechet Nida. It says that during marital relations, husband and wife together, if the man finishes first, she will give birth to a female. If the female finishes first, she will give birth to a male. As it says, it's all based on a verse in Parashat Tazria, Ishati ki Tazria, that says when a woman conceives, but the word Tazria can mean conceive, to have a child, conceive a child, or it could also mean to climax, to emit seed. So when a woman emits seed, if you read it that way, she gives birth to a male. The next verse says. That's how the Gemara learns it out. So he says that therefore the women really wanted it from their husbands. They were much more aroused, and therefore they finished first, and that's why there were so many males over there, so many boys.
Nature of the air.
Then, after the woman gave birth to a few boys in this way, her desire for her husband decreased to below that of her husband's, meaning that he would then climax first, finish first during their marital relations, thereby conceiving of a girl. So he explained how to fit it with the Gemara. How do we know that it's going to be a boy first and then eventually a girl after the women get tired of it, I guess.
Get tired of what?
Of their husbands. They're not as attracted to him anymore, not as desiring for it anymore. So when they're with him, he is the man still has a high level of desire. So eventually he's going to finish first, and that's going to be a girl, that child. Last line. After the birth of the first girl in the family, they would just stop having children. Says the Ben Yehoiada. That's how he explains.
How did they stop having children?
How they stop having children? You have to say either the woman took some sort of potion to become sterile, or they just stopped sleeping together, and he would get another girl who has a high level of desire for him, marry somebody else. I don't know. That's one or the other. Last commentary here, Vayeleket Yosef. This is written by Rabbi Yosef ben Naftali HaKohen Schwartz, late 1800s to early 1900s.
What's that mean?
That's when he lived.
No, the name.
Vayeleket means to collect, and he collected. It's based on a verse. There's a verse that says that Yosef collected something, I forgot what. Okay. It says that he collected all the wheat, all the storehouses during the 7 years of plenty, I believe.
Sorry, sounds a better name.
Okay. Kfar Dichraya. He's going to explain Kfar Dichraya on a deeper level, the city of males. Look what he says. It can be understood based on the following. There's a Gemara, Masechet Bava Batra 141a, that says, when a daughter, is first, it is a nice sign for the subsequent banim, sons. We saw this Gemara already. Girl is born first, is a good sign for the sons that come after. Like Danny is about to experience soon, B'ezrat Hashem. The Shev Shema Atata, it's another famous book, written by Rabbi Aryeh Leib HaKohen Heller, before him. He explained, based on the Zohar Kadosh, that Ben, a son, represents wisdom, while Bat, a daughter, represents fear of heaven. These are Kabbalistic terms. Ben represents wisdom, and Bat, a daughter, represents fear of heaven. Furthermore, it says in Pirkei Avot, famous Mishnah Pirkei Avot 3:9, Rabbi Chanan ben Dosa says, one whose fear of sin comes before his wisdom his wisdom will uphold for long term, will endure. That was a better word, endure. I should have wrote that instead of uphold. Endure. One whose wisdom comes before his fear of sin, though, his wisdom does not uphold, will not endure for the long term. You understand? Meaning, first, you got to have fear of God in here. Then you can work on your wisdom, and the wisdom will stay. Yes. If it comes the other way, if first you want to learn, and then maybe work on fear of God, whatever you learn will not stay with you. It's not genuine. That's a simple understanding. Thus, now he says he wants to go deeper. If you plug in the terms fear of sin for daughter and wisdom for son, which we said that's what they represent according to the Zohar, into the statement in Bava Batra from the Gemara that we just mentioned, then you will, if you plug those terms in, you get the following. That when fear of sin is first, it's a nice sign, a good sign for wisdom that follows. Right? Like the Mishnah said. So too, if wisdom comes first, the fear of sin will not uphold, like we said. This is also hinted in the verse of in Devarim 32:19, where it says, Hashem will see and be provoked by the anger caused him by his sons and his daughters. That's one of the warnings that Moshe gives to the people before he died. Hashem will see and be provoked by the anger caused to him by his sons and his daughters. In the order of the verse, sons are mentioned first before the daughters in this verse, hinting that Hashem's anger will manifest why? Because the sons came before the daughters. What does that mean? Plug in the terms. What does sons mean? Ben means wisdom. Wisdom, because wisdom came before sin, before fear of sin.
Is this an explanation to the Beer Kilber as well? Or is this
Yes, it's all one big drash. As the next verse says right away, they are a generation of reversals. Dorta Pachot Hemman. That's what it is. They're a generation of reversals, which means they did the wrong order. They reversed the ideal order of fear of sin first, and then only then wisdom. They did wisdom first, and then fear of sin. It doesn't work like that. The consequence of such folly. What's folly? It's a nice word. What does folly mean? A mistake. From the word fool. The consequence of this is hinted there further in the verse, at the end of the verse, where it says, sons whose upbringing is not in them. Banim asher lo emun bam, something like that, if I remember correctly. Meaning their wisdom will not be upheld. That is the depth of our Gemara concerning the village of Dichraya, that they would have many sons first, correlating to the plenty of Torah wisdom that they had and they worked on. And only at the end they would have a daughter. Meaning some fear of sin at the end. And then, what does it say? They stopped. What does it mean they stopped? Their Torah wisdom did not uphold. They stopped learning because they did the wrong order. That, he says, was their mistake and their sin. That's the depth that he explains. So Baruch Hashem, we did a lot of commentaries. Next week we're going to do the Chatzar Yosef on this particular section. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen v'amen.